in Canada and in the US, queer founders get 0.5% of funding out there.
I've had investors actually say to me, you know what, don't tell the story about you being gay and about you having tattoos, being indigenous. And I'm like, wait a minute, you saying that is exactly why I need to do this.
There are certain insights that specific people have around your space, your business, your stage of financing, and take the advice that they actually offer that is relevant to you, that is from experience, versus just like a different worldview.
Welcome to the QT podcast. This show is where queer tech professionals, entrepreneurs, and leaders come together to share insights, challenges, and success, because queer innovators deserve the mic. I'm your host, Naoufel Testaouni. I use he, they pronouns, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of QueerTech. This season, supported by the Canadian Media Fund, we're taking you straight to the 2024 QT conference stage. From breaking systematic barriers and using tech for good to scaling businesses and creating wealth, these episodes bring you unfiltered discussions from industry leaders on the most pressing challenges and opportunities facing our community. On this episode, we're bringing you the QTQ 2024 session, Powering Prosperity, the future of small business and tech in Canada, where I, Naoufel Testaouni, co-founder and CEO of QueerTech, led a conversation on how innovation and technology are transforming the entrepreneurial landscape and driving economic prosperity. Our panelists included two members of the QueerTech Board of Directors, Bobbie Racette, founder and CEO of Virtual Gurus, and Marlon Thompson, founder of Opening Round. Each panelist offered a powerful insights on the key challenges and opportunities for Canadian entrepreneurs, the impact of tech and business ecosystems, and how small business can leverage digital tools to stay competitive in a fast-growing world. Let's get started. Today, I have two amazing founders who are here to tell their story. Marlon, why don't we start with you? Tell us a little bit about your journey and how did you get to this stage?
Hi guys, my name is Marlon, and thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. How did I get to this stage? I've been in the innovation ecosystem for about a decade, which is kind of crazy to me. You kind of think of yourself at the beginning and remember that age, and I'm not that age anymore. I've got some gray hairs to prove it. I started just like as an employee at a startup. I actually was born and raised in Toronto and flew out to Vancouver for my first job at a startup. I was working in operations. I was really thirsty for knowledge and like understanding how things worked, and just kind of moved my way up within a couple different early stage consumer startups, and then got the opportunity to move over to the VC side through a couple different exciting, unique experiences that I can get into, and started my own company in 2020 and was fortunate enough to exit that company in 2023. And so today I'm just kind of kicking back. I just launched a consulting business and I'm doing some angel investing, but that's who I am and that's how I got to this stage.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Bobbie, founder and CEO of Virtual Gurus. I founded Virtual Gurus about 7 years ago to create a job for myself because nobody would hire me. I'm from essentially the Canadian Texas, otherwise known as Calgary, Alberta. And I really struggled finding work as a queer Indigenous woman with tattoos everywhere. So I started it, and I had no idea that it was going to turn into one of Canada's and now North America's largest talent platform. So what we do is we match...
Yes. Big applause.
We match underserved talent with businesses of all sizes. So some of our clients are MasterCard, Bank of Montreal, IDEO. And we built AI into it so that we can act as a 24/7 support for your business through AI. And I was able to go on to closing my Series A, which led me to be the first Indigenous queer woman, but Indigenous woman, to close the Series A, and I'm just about to close the Series B.
Amazing. Big applause. Series B again. So, Bobbie, I'm gonna go to you. What inspired you to start the Virtual Gurus? Why do you think it's needed? Why now?
Well, okay, so for me, I was working in oil and gas in Alberta. I actually moved there from Montreal. And just like everybody else, I was working in oil and gas. But I like to consider myself a workhorse. I am a hard worker. I work hard day in and day out. So I ended up working my way up to becoming a high-angle safety technician. So I was one of the fun guys. I get to rappel out of an elevator or a helicopter and rappel down and save people that were inside the vessels. I really liked it, but then when the layoffs happened, the queer part didn't really matter, but because I was a woman, they laid me off right away. I was one of the first. So I struggled. I tried finding work and nobody would hire me. I actually would walk into places and see them say, yeah, thank you, and throw my resume to the bottom of the trash can. And this really hurt, Administration is my background, and I know I'm not exactly Donna from Suits, but I have fucking skills, right? So they still wouldn't hire me, and I hated it, and it bothered me. So I thought, you know what? I got to start something of my own and create my own job. I'm the master of my own destiny at this point. 10 months in, $300 in my pocket, I started seeing gig economy, started seeing all this kind of stuff, freelancers, Uber drivers. So I thought, hey, I'll start off-sourcing myself as an administration person. So I cold called people on Craigslist, and I was like, hey, do you want an administration person? They're like, sure, who's that? And I'm like, that's me. And then I would sell, and then I ended up getting so many clients that the light bulb went on, and I thought, hey, I could build a platform to provide work to people just like me, people who have been told no, people who are from marginalized communities, people with disabilities, LGBT folks who are transitioning genders. We have prison workers, we have veterans in the system, everybody that doesn't fit your typical 9-to-5 mold. And so my passion is to provide work to people that have lived through the challenges and the barriers that I have.
Amazing. Thank you. Marlon, I want to talk about Future Capital and why you started it, because that was a powerful business that you were building there. So tell us a little bit, why did you start that, and why did you feel that was the right time to start that business?
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually haven't spoken about Future Capital in a few months, so I'm really enjoying the opportunity to look back and think about those early days. And I think for me, similar to a lot of founders, not every founder, but similar to a lot of founders, I started a company that was really in place to solve a problem that I was actively experiencing. So I had worked in the accelerator space for about 3 years and got an opportunity to work at a venture capital firm here in Toronto. And I was just constantly behind the 8 ball. Like I really had a hard time grasping the language, which I think can be the biggest barrier to entry in venture capital, like the industry of venture capital. And so we actually started working on this project at the firm to help improve people's financial literacy, specifically underrepresented investors' financial literacy around this asset class, so venture capital as an asset class. And that's why we started. It was really kind of a problem that I was experiencing, that I knew a lot of my peers who were new to the industry wanted to have an impact in venture capital were experiencing. And so we built a program. It started as like a really simple course, and by the time we sold it, we had, I think, 7 active programs. We had built a platform. We had done a bunch of different work, and it really kind of snowballed out of this real problem that I was actively experiencing, which was just not having the language to be effective within my role and within the venture capital space.
And do you want to touch base about the new venture that you're working on?
Sure. I mean, going through an acquisition is a crazy experience. And, so I actually just got back from about a 3-month hiatus or sabbatical, or whatever you want to call it. And I'm back into kind of my role as an advisor for founders, actively investing. I've got about 10 companies in my angel portfolio and a couple funds as well, and really addressing the same problems from a different angle, kind of going a little bit deeper with companies as an advisor and as a fractional exec for companies as it's needed. But I think one of the through lines through all of my work is just really seeing that there's these barriers to entry for underrepresented individuals that are really, really consistent and can really be supported with good advice and time and attention and just some literacy around how to do this crazy gymnastics routine of raising capital.
Amazing. You know, one of the things I love about these two founders who started these successful companies, both of them started these companies to help other people. And that's really powerful, and I see that a lot in our community, and a lot of founders here who have companies are thinking about not only starting a business because it's fun and like I want to be a founder, but also I want to serve people and serve my community. And so when you launch this business, and as you build your companies, you're building teams, how is your queerness, and we talk a lot about the queer power at the QueerTech conferences, but also our indigeneity, being a woman, being a Black person, have helped you or dictate the culture that you build in the company. So how do you think about the culture that you build and how do you approach it?
So, leadership and culture is one of the hardest things when you're working in a scale up because you're moving so fast that it is so hard just to miss the littlest things, And I'd realized a few years ago that I needed to hire somebody that was going to be our head of culture for these exact reasons. Because what I see and what I do at the company, I've learned that I can't expect my employees to do that. They're not owners, although one of our mission and vision and value statements is we act like owners. But I have to remember that as a person and them as people and who they are, they're not owners, and so I can't expect them to do what I do. That was one of the first steps I realized, that in order for me to fix the culture of my company, I was gonna need to come to embrace that. Virtual Gurus' culture went through a really massive change in this last couple of years. We lost over 30 employees in less than 6 months that were quitting or being terminated. And, it's because they weren't living my vision and mission, which is equality for all. And there was bullying in the workplace, there was toxicity happening. And it was finally my COO at the time that sat me down and said, we've got a problem. And unless you actually do something about it, it's not gonna stop. So I created some workshops to have my team help build the mission and vision and values of the company and our statements and have them be a part of it. And then I certified them as being values gurus. So we're mostly remote now, but in their desks, they have a star that shows they're a values guru. So if you're a new employee, you can go to them and you feel safe in going to them. So obviously one of my main mission and visions and my main DEI efforts of everything that I do is equality, and is that we will provide work to everybody that has been told no. And so it's being able to come to work feeling safe. So people bring their dogs to work. We have a bring your mom to work day, which is fun. We have every Friday afternoon, if we're in the office, we shut down and we play Jackbox TV and have a glass of wine, and I just sit with them. I have every Friday later afternoon after that as well, we have Fuck Up Fridays. So you can stand up and talk about how you made a mistake that week and embrace the mistakes, embrace the accountability. And if you're doing it with your team, that culture is perfect almost, because you're showing that accountability of who you are. So I guess long answer short would be, if you want your employees to embrace the culture that you feel so entwined with, then you need to embrace it with them.
And I love that. Like at the QueerTech team, every Friday, we have the QT wrap up. And so every team member has to come up with at least 3 wins of the week, 3 fails of the week. What's your learning? And we do that because a lot of people will think about all the things that we fail at. And we do so much in people, but you don't think about all the little wins and how are we going to learn from that. So I love instituting that in the culture. What about you, Marlon?
I'm going to be really honest. I never really figured that out as a founder. We were acquired when we had 5 employees, and 2 of those employees were contracts. So we were still really small. We absolutely had a culture, there's no doubt about it. As soon as you have one other employee, there is a culture there. But I think what I saw along kind of the venture building path in terms of culture creation within the company was that just as a founder, you have so much influence on the company that the culture becomes like your personality in a lot of ways, honestly, and I've seen this with other companies too. So I think that is like an inevitable truth around culture and early stage companies. I think there's a professionalization that happens around Series A where you have to be more conscientious of what is happening in the business once you get to about like 50 people. But for us, we were so small that it was just kind of people that were like-minded, incredibly diverse because of the work that we were doing. And I think more importantly than culture for Future Capital, we also created like a really massive community of over 1,000 investors. And I think, again, we saw a lot of reflections back to our team, who we were, our champions, and our values just reflected back in the community. So I think a lot of it is organic until it has to be more structured.
Building and creating culture is very hard. Fundraising is even harder. And we looked at the stats, and if you're not familiar, in Canada and in the US, queer founders get 0.5% of funding out there. And if you look at intersectionalities of founders, there is less and less. And so I want to hear your experience fundraising in this market, that it's already hard when the economy is hard, but you've been doing this for a while. So what was your experience fundraising, and what are some of the challenges you face, and what some advice would you give some founders in the room here?
I could talk on fundraising all day just because of the headaches that I've gone through. But, I will tell you that in my fundraising journey, some of the, we'll say the hardships, when I was first declined, or we'll say denied by 170 investors, I was getting desperate. I was taking money out of my mentor's pocket. My parents were writing me checks, $20,000 just to keep the lights on, pay the employees. I was paying them over, I was paying myself. I didn't even pay myself for the first 3 years of the company. And after around the 170th investor, I was like, something's got to give. But I found throughout that whole trail of pitching everyone in the evolution of going through a no, 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 to how the pain felt, the pain of the hurt and the sadness and the grief and the anger of everybody saying no to me. I've had investors actually say to me, you know what, don't tell the story about you being gay and about you having tattoos and being Indigenous. And I'm like, wait a minute, you saying that is exactly why I need to do this, right? And so I didn't shy away from doing that. Now, I guess maybe that's why a lot of them said no, because let's be real, the VC world is predominantly the white cis male man in suits. And I don't really get along with them. And I try to, but they don't really like me because I never shy away by being who I am. Dressing the way I want to dress, being exactly who I am and who I feel confident in. If I can't feel confident, then how am I going to sell my company? How am I going to scale my company? How am I going to do that? So it quickly came to CERN that I needed to make sure I was bringing on investors that fit my thesis. Investors can have theses, but you should have your own thesis as well. What is a good investor to you? Who is an investor that's going to help you? Who do you want on your cap table and who do you not want on your cap table? And once I started really opening up to that, I started realizing I can do this, and I realized that there's something you don't want me to do. All you have to do is tell me I can't do it. And so I was like, I set out on a vengeance. And so I think the number one thing is staying true to yourself and your story, and living your story is going to help you take your company to measurements that you'll never even know were there, that it was approachable or achievable. So I think it's just being you and staying you. Investors don't get that, but there's more and more diverse impact investors coming out that do get it. And, there's a lot more of us out there. So I think if we could just get a lot more of us out in tech, and if you need to raise money, live your story. Don't be shy.
Marlon.
Yeah, I've always really respected Bobbie's ability to fundraise. Genuinely, we did a panel together back in the day at Future Capital. I don't know if you remember. And part of the reason I really wanted to speak with you is because it's really hard to do what you've done. Honestly, it's rare and it's difficult, and especially when you put yourself in the body of someone that isn't the conventional founder, it becomes that much more difficult. And so it requires a lot of just blind confidence and resilience. And so I've really always respected that. And the reason I share that is because that wasn't my experience fundraising. I think fundraising was probably the hardest thing that I ever did, because that level of failure and that consistency of being told no for different reasons, it was just so confusing to me. It really does beat you up. So we raised one small round, and this is all without getting too into the weeds, but this is all a part of capitalization strategy. Is how much fundraising do you have in you as a founder? and for us, an acquisition made sense because, to be honest, I didn't really want to fundraise anymore. That was one of the many reasons that it made sense, because fundraising is just so challenging, and it all kind of dovetails in really nicely for us, because that was also part of why we started Future Capital, was to make sure that there were more diverse investors that had the acumen and also capacity to invest into companies. Because when you sitting across from someone that looks just like me, it doesn't guarantee that I'm going to get a check from them, but it does mean that there's going to be quite a bit less bullshit that we're going to have to get through to get to the meat of the conversation. So it's always been a really, really interesting kind of an interesting challenge for us to solve, I think, in this space, that we're nowhere near solving it, but I think there's a lot of tricks that are required to fundraise successfully.
One thing that I want to say, just to chime off of that, is once you fundraise, you almost have to continue fundraising, right? Because you're now burning more, and so it's you've kind of broken that, and it's not going to stop. So I was sitting over in the networking room chatting with someone, and I had told him that I had to embrace and I had to become comfortable with the uncomfortable part of fundraising, because it never stops and it never gets easier. People think it does the further you go, because, okay, well, at that time it was 1.8 million, now maybe 20 million, and now it's whatever. But It doesn't get easier no matter how much millions you have. What gets easier is your confidence and your resilience to continue pushing through. 90% of businesses that are fundraising stop and they die because they can't get through the no's. And that's the hardest part is just getting through that part because it never gets comfortable. Everybody, even for me, I'm raising right now, had 2 investor meetings this morning at the hotel on my way here. And I leave tomorrow to go and pitch more, right? So you're constantly always pitching. So just remember that when you get into it. Keep pushing yourself through.
If I could just add one really quick thing, I think one of the reflections that I have around the no's and how to kind of face those and engage with them is the first time I went out to fundraise, I just thought every investor knew something that I didn't know, and that is not true. Like, you have to understand that there are certain insights that specific people have around your space, your business, your stage of financing, and take the advice that they actually offer that is relevant to you, that is from experience, versus just like a different worldview. I think that's where it can get really confusing, is because everyone will tell you no for a different reason, and then you don't really know what feedback to accept and to use.
That's a really great point. Recently, as we were talking about founders and QueerTech thinking about the founder program, I started approaching VCs and talking about, how can they support our founders? And some of them, the first thing they say, this is really amazing, but I don't really care about who they sleep with. And I'm like, but that's the reason why they shouldn't work with you. If you don't care about who we are, individual, this is not about who they sleep with, this is about who we are as individual. And if you don't care about that, then why should we work? And one of the things I was like, we need to reverse this pattern where our queer founder, I want VCs to come and pitch the queer founders, because now there is more and more VCs thinking about impact. And I think founders need to do their work also in due diligence to pick VCs, because you get worn out so quickly if you just start pitching everyone for whatever reason. Hey QT, did you know QueerTech is more than just this award-winning podcast? We offer 3 cohort-style programs to help you build your career in tech. QT Access helps US LGBTQIA+ professionals break into tech. QT Leaders empowers experienced professionals to advance their careers, and QT Founders is a startup accelerator to early first-time queer entrepreneurs. We also host quarterly QT Connects meetup in Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, Calgary, Ottawa, and Halifax. And don't forget QT Cubes, Canada's largest US LGBTQI+ tech conference. Ready to plug in? Join our community today at queertech.org. Okay, back to the show now. Bobbie, I want to talk about you scale the business and you're scaling your business, and you think a lot about the impact, the social impact that your business have, and you made that part of the value proposition that you have. So how are you scaling the business and thinking about growth while also maintaining the social impact that you want to have in a capitalistic world?
Yeah, I've thought a lot about this. Actually, yesterday we had our in-person board meeting in Calgary, and we're starting to think about my exit, the exit of the company. We've already got LOIs on the table, people wanting to buy. For me, I think if you asked me, maybe depending on what time during my journey, I would say, hey, I'm ready to quit right now because I'm tired. But then I'm like, wait, I'm not ready to let go of the baby, because nobody's going to be able to create and continue with the impact that we're doing better than me at this point in the company. So I keep committing, another year and a half, and then a year and a half goes by, another year. So I think the hardest thing about scaling, even take out the impact, the hardest thing about scaling is literally making sure that your team isn't bursting and dying, because their mental health is a really big thing in a scale up. And then you're scaling thousands of people that are working in the platform, and then you're scaling the sales, you're scaling the SDR, so the outbound departments, and then you're scaling your marketing, and you're scaling our customer service center is huge right now. And you have to do all of that in a way where you're actively climbing and being able to do that, all while keeping hold of your impact. So I set out on a mission. I'm not really a part of the operations. I'm the CEO, but I'm out speaking and creating more awareness for the company. But I set out on a mission that 95% of our talent must identify as Black, Indigenous people of color. 65% must identify as women, female. And then we go further down, 45% must be part of the LGBTQ community, a certain amount of veterans, certain amount of semi-retired, single stay-at-home moms, yada, yada. So we scale that, and so every month I make sure that my team presents the numbers to me so I can actually see how far off they are. That's just the number one thing, is create those measurements, set those measurements that you set. They're gonna change every year, but set something for you that you want your team to hit, and get them to hit those. Those are KPIs. Impact is KPIs. So add that into your measurements for sure.
Absolutely. Marlon, you choose the path of acquisition and sold the business. So tell us a little bit, founders who are starting business, because these are two paths that they can follow. Why acquire so early, and why did you choose that, and how should founders think about it?
Okay, don't put me on the spot or anything. I mean, first of all, when we launched Future Capital, I did not know what was going to happen, to be honest. We didn't know if we would get eaten up by like a big corporation or pivot into something completely different. We went through our own internal pivots in those 3+ years that we were alive. And so I think my experience was that it was kind of right place, right time. And I mean, gosh, it's hard to talk about because well, exactly, Bobbie understands, as a founder, it's your baby. It really is. So I think even today there's machinations in my head of like different ways we could have done it, right? But at the end of the day, I think the choice to sell was the market, to be completely honest with you, was pretty grim in 2023, and everything was kind of going this way. And we were either going to have to go out, fundraise again, which, to be completely frank, would have meant like reinventing a narrative. And that was just so unappealing to me, to be completely honest. I also think I was genuinely naive about how hard it is to go through an acquisition. I was like, yeah, we can do this. We'll run this process. And I think if that process was unsuccessful, I don't even know where I would be today, because it was a lot. So I think for us, it was really a strategic decision at the right time. And we were able to find a buyer that had the same values, that wanted to continue the work, which for us, like, we were total DE&I, like impact-driven business. That was enough to say, yeah, let's go through this process. But to be completely honest, if I knew how hard it would have been, I probably would have thought twice. I probably would have made the same decision, but I think you go in a little bit blind when you go into that for the first time, because it's a little crazy. Like, acquisitions are really crazy.
Yeah, and you know what, I do a lot of work in the BD world, and like startups I worked at, we always had these two conversations. The first one is, what would an acquisition looks like? Who are the partner? And then how do we do that through the business development and build that relationship? The other one is if we want to get acquired soon, or there is the scaling strategy. And so then kind of look a little different. Who are the partners we want to have to scale the company? Is there any strategy for acquisition you would advise founders to think about as they're building the business?
Honestly, I think you need to outsource certain parts of that process. We worked with an M&A firm. I would be totally lying to you if I said we could do it without them. There's absolutely no way. So I think it should be led by the financials. It has to make sense on paper. That is what we're doing. We're in the business of business. So I think really making sure that it's financially viable, that it makes sense, that there is actually a path for growth in front of you. Otherwise, I could see it feeling really vampiric, the process. If everybody doesn't win in some way, shape, or form, and there's no compensation, and you don't walk away feeling you've gained something, I can imagine that just being like a totally crushing experience. So I think you really need to trust experts, and just like anything, like there are people that have done multiple acquisitions a month. There are people that really know how to do it. So you need to trust experts and have advisories. I had like kind of an advisory board around the acquisition as well. So I think that's my strategy for being an entrepreneur, as well as for going through a really significant amount of financing, as well as going through an acquisition, is make sure that you have an advisory board. It doesn't need to be formal, but a number of people that have subject matter expertise in different areas, to make sure you don't make big mistakes that will really kind of hurt you in the end.
Thank you. At this conference, and the theme this year is queering up how to expand your mind to be future ready. We talk about people who are students and accessing industry. We talked about people who are becoming leaders, but entrepreneurs also have to think about how to keep yourself being future ready. Technology is changing so much, the world is changing so much, and so how do you keep up with your knowledge in terms of technology and what's happening in the tech world so you can continue to be relevant in this world? Bobbie.
So at Virtual Gurus, what we do is every quarter we have essentially what we call kind of like a knowledge test jam. So we all sit in the room, we order lunch, and we'll hang out in there for 8, 9, 10 hours, depending. And we all are instructed with bringing the newest and latest technology trends that are out there. And then we talk about essentially how can we implement it into Virtual Gurus. And so then we have a whiteboard session, and we have like our whole thing is whiteboarded, and we whiteboard it all out right there. So we test jam essentially right in that moment and think we could do this, we could do this, this, and this, we could add it in here. And then whoever's employee idea that we implement, we get them to do the launch of it. So we build it out, or technology builds it out, and then that employee gets full credit for launching that part of the technology. So we're able to kind of share that it's not just me that's the founder, everybody's the founder there. But having many minds in the room bringing ideas to the table is so much better than having one mind in the room bringing ideas. And you'd be surprised when you have everybody's mind and knowledge thinking, the ideas that come from it is just, I can't even get over it sometimes. Sometimes I just sit there so quiet, like just keep talking. Let them talk, let them be a part of the process. Be collaborative, because you'll see so much magic happen that way. So it's really just keeping up and helping your teams create the magic with you.
I love that. That's such a great way to integrate learnings from the whole team. Marlon, from your experience, how do you keep future ready?
For me, I learn best through writing and research. So I read a newsletter that really honestly does help me to force myself to know what the hell's going on in the space. But I think a more tactical kind of approach, because that's not for everybody, but a more tactical way to do that is to have like a community of founders. I found that like really helped me, especially as our company started to grow, and especially as we started to go through this process of selling, to stay grounded in like what's happening outside of your bubble, because I think it can be really easy to just be all things virtual guru, and nothing that's happening outside of those four walls matters, or for any company. And so for me, having like a community of other founders that were in other spaces, you just inevitably learn through them, vicariously through them, what's happening outside of your business, which is kind of the only thing you focus on while you're in it.
I'd have to agree on that. Community is so important. So obviously we have the QueerTech community that I'm a part of. I'm a part of the Indigenous Tech Circle, which is killing it. There's over 350 members in there of Indigenous Tech founders, which is just, I love it. And then a part of the A-list that's based out of Toronto here, but all across Canada. And then you get to go and talk to people and be a part of it and meet other founders that are learning just like you. One of the other things that I always, and just to go off of that, is I always suggest having and creating a personal board of advisors, because your personal board of advisors are the people that can support you in any way that you need in that area, and you can bring ideas to them and talk. So you can create it with anybody. Just ask somebody that you've met at a conference that you really like on your personal board of advisors, and it really does help. Community goes a long way.
Which was a great segue to my last question. How did community help you being successful? And I love those answers, because a lot of this morning, my message to this community was, first thing you do is show up. If there is an event like this that are for queer people, show up for yourself, because there is so much opportunities here that you can embrace. There is opportunities for work, there's opportunities for investment, so community is really good. I also love what you said about writing. One mentor told me a long time ago, if you want to know you understand the topic, write about it. And it's so good way. Like if you sit down and you can write about it and explain it, then you understand it. So that's great. Thank you, yes, you, for tuning into this episode of the Cutie Podcast. Queering the tech ecosystem is a big mission, and we couldn't do it without you. This episode was produced by Lauren Hicks and mixed by Ryan Richard of Rival Digital. Very special thanks to the Canadian Media Fund for their support in making this season possible. Feeling fabulously inspired? You can help our show reach even more queering tech professionals. Subscribe to our show, give us a great rating, or write us a review. Until next time, keep queering the tech ecosystem.